Hey guys, welcome to module 1 of the 7-day startup course. This module is all about ideas. How do you come up with an idea that's going to be great for you and give you the maximum chance of having a great business? Now, I'm calling this the 9 elements of a great bootstrap business idea. In module 0, I talked about a bunch of things that go into a successful business. A lot of people will tell you that ideas don't matter, only execution matters. I know that's not true because every great startup that I think of has a great idea behind it. So I know ideas matter. I know the way you execute something matters. I know hustle matters, how hard you work on the things that need to be done at the time. And those are the 3 main things that are in your control that are going to matter to impact your business. But there are so many other things. Relationships, networks matter. Luck is a thing that you can't ignore. Timing is crucial in business. There are so many different things that go into creating a great business that it's not as simple as just having a good idea, obviously. But the idea is really important. And especially for self-funded or bootstrap founders, the things that go into an idea for your business are going to be different to the stuff you read out there, because that information is not for someone who's an individual who's starting their business. And one of the things I found with my company was, with my last business, the fit just wasn't very good for me. And that was one of the reasons why it didn't work. There was just something that didn't feel right about it. And so these are some of the elements I came up with that I noticed from my business and observing other businesses that form the foundation of a great idea for a self-funded entrepreneur. So the first one is enjoyable daily tasks. And I've got an image there of typing because I love creating content. And when I sold my agency, what I really wanted to do was I didn't want to go out and have meetings and trying to sell people websites anymore. I really hated doing that. I didn't want to go to a networking event and tell people I built websites. What I really wanted to do was create content. And I wanted to build the sort of business where that's what I did. I created content. And before that, I'd started a bunch of other businesses. One really bad example was selling iPhone cases, and I'd spend every day packing iPhone cases and going to the post office and sending them. And the way I was spending my time was just horrible, and eventually burnt out. I hated it and just stopped doing it. So you really need to think about what you're going to be doing every day. Can you start a business that's going to have you doing what you love doing? And if not, then maybe it is a great business idea, but maybe it's not a great business idea for you. So have a think about what you're going to be enjoying doing every day. The second one is product founder fit, and it's sort of tightly related to that. And this is the example I gave with the agency before. There was just something a little bit off about that business for me. I wasn't really the right person to be running an agency. And I looked around at my competitors, and they were sort of all led by these, alpha male, really big salesy entrepreneur type guys. And, they'd be going out and presenting and pitching and really selling what they're doing. And I was just like, man, I just want to write blog posts. And I couldn't really build that business as myself. If I was a different person, I probably would have been able to do a better job building that business. So I wanted to start a business where the fit was really good for me. And that's part of the reason why I think WP Curve went well, was because it just felt right. It felt like the way I structured it, the way I didn't have to really sell it. It was just a simple monthly subscription. I could do my content, put a link on it, and send people to the site, and if they wanted to sign up, they could sign up. And that kind of fit worked a lot better for me than what I'd experienced with my last agency. So really have a think about what type of entrepreneur you are. Does it feel right for you to be running the business you're running? And some people just get this way off and the business never works. They never know why, because they've seen other people make it work. But when you're a self-funded entrepreneur, especially if you're flying solo or it's just you and 1 or 2 other people, this idea of product founder fit is really important. And people talk a lot about product market fit, but the problem with a lot of the startup literature is it has a bunch of assumptions into it, and it sort of assumes you've got a perfect team. It assumes you've got perfect validation techniques and a perfect amount of money. The reality is, for most of us entrepreneurs, is we don't have that stuff. So you need to really think about you as a person and how your business feels to you in terms of the product founder fit. So the third element of a great bootstrap business idea is having a scalable business model. And I mentioned in module 0 that a startup has to be high growth potential. It has to be high impact potential. So you can't go and create a little small corner shop in a local area and call that a startup and expect that to easily scale. Some businesses just do not scale easily. And if you want to create something with a high impact, then you need to create something that's designed to grow. in this little chart here, I'm running through a bunch of different business models that are sort of popular for online businesses, and I've got a bunch of factors that go into what I think leads to scale. So it has to be, so on the left there you can see it has to be profitable, has to be a large market, it has to be naturally building assets, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Has to be a simple proposition for someone. If it's a really complicated thing what you're doing, it's going to be very difficult to scale and to proceduralize that. And there has to be a consistent revenue. It's really, really hard to scale a business if it's up and down launches and really cyclical. So on the left-hand side of this chart, you can see SaaS, which is software as a service. And to me, that's still, in a way, the ultimate business model, because there's high profit margins. There's often a very large market, unless it's like a niche product. You're naturally building assets because you're building this list of recurring customers. You're also building software that people can't easily replicate, assuming that it's your own proprietary software. SaaS is very simple. It's normally pay $50 a month and you get the software, and it's as simple as that. And because it's generally recurring, it's very, very consistent, extremely consistent. So in a way, software as a service is, to me, the ultimate business model. The problem is you can't launch a software as a service business quickly. So it's not necessarily a good fit for the 7-day startup or a first-time entrepreneur. I'll delve into that a little bit more later. But as far as like high-growth business model goes, software as a service is about as good as it gets. On the other end of the spectrum is the agency, and I drew on my experience with my agency in that the underlying profit was not there, and I'll talk a bit more about that later, but the business was fundamentally unprofitable, and I never really knew that, but once I was honest with myself about the amount of work that went into things, I could see that there was really no profit there. It was just my time that I was undervaluing. It's generally small market. Most agencies just run in a local area, which really limits the market potential. You're not naturally building assets. Clients can go from one agency to another generally, unless you do something really dodgy like holding their source files or something. You're not really building assets for yourself. It's not simple. Running an agency is very, very complicated. There's so many moving parts, so many different types of services that agencies run. So that makes it really difficult, and they're often very inconsistent in terms of revenue. So to me, the ultimate business is further towards the software as a service, but if you throw in the ability to launch quickly, then services or productized services or service as a service, depending on what you want to call it, which is the WP Curve business model, which is delving into most of the benefits of software, but it's also giving you the ability to launch quickly. So the profit margin is not as high on services because you have people doing the work and not machines. Potentially the market is still huge. You're not building as many assets because you're not necessarily building that piece of software that is going to give you that intellectual property. So that's something you might have to work on later on or think about how you can build those assets. If you do simple monthly recurring service, it's very simple. It meets that criteria. And consistent revenue, it meets that criteria. So obviously the more amount of greens, the better on this chart. And as you get further down towards the agency model, I think it's much harder to have green on there. So when you're starting your business, have a look at this. Have a look at the types of businesses I've identified in here. Of course, there's hundreds of other different types of businesses, but you can use these 5 points as a way of sort of determining, is this going to be something that can grow into a big market? So number 4, profitable without the founder. This is really critical. If something's going to grow, it has to be profitable without the founder. And this is what I found with my agency. Ultimately, I was never truthful with myself about how much my time was worth. And if I was to replace all of the different roles I did with someone of similar experience in a similar location, the business would have been unprofitable. So really the whole time I was running an unprofitable business, I just didn't realize. So this is where you have to be really honest with yourself and say, how much is it costing you to have a customer? And then how much are you charging for that customer? Because if there is not a decent profit margin there, and I would say 50% is when you're starting is a minimum, because so many calculations are estimated and it's probably, no matter what you do, it's probably lower than you think. But if there's no decent profit margin there, the business is simply not going to grow. So what I have for this is, in the resources section, you'll find an example of a live metrics growth tracking spreadsheet that I use. It's got a bunch of cost estimates in there, and it just gives you an idea of plug in 100 customers into your business, how do the financials look? Plug in 300 customers, how do the financials look? And you can use this, and these numbers in here are made up, by the way, so you have to estimate them for yourself. You can use this to get a feel for how your business is going to look down the track when it grows, or the other thing you can do is just really be honest about the amount of services and software that go into servicing one customer, and assume your business is at a reasonable scale, and then divide that by the number of customers and figure out how much it's actually going to cost you each month to have that customer, then at least double it to work out what your price is. And with WP Curve, I did this. I sort of estimated the amount of jobs people would request. I estimated how much we'd have to pay people. And then I looked at how the business looks after 100, 500 customers. And these example metrics ended up being reasonably accurate. I think us underestimated the costs a little bit, but they ended up being reasonably accurate. So this is a really good exercise to do to work out if you've got a fundamental profit problem in your business. So a great idea for a business is an idea that naturally builds an asset you can sell. And the way I think about this is it's something physical. You're building something. So with services, it's quite difficult. And this is the one where software is naturally better than services in this criteria, because software, you're building a piece of proprietary software, and it's very, very difficult for someone to come along and just copy that. And if you're building an asset, one day you want to sell your business, and regardless of whether you want to sell your business, you do want to build value into your business. And the way you build value is by building assets. So it's worth thinking about what kind of asset you're building. If it's just a recurring subscription, a list of clients that are paying you each month, that's definitely an asset. If it's your brand, if you're investing heavily in your brand, then that's an asset. Your content, your website, your people, they could all be assets. Ideally, the best companies have some kind of intellectual property as an asset. Like if you think of software companies or like Airbnb, Uber, they have this underlying proprietary algorithm, Google, Facebook, that other people are going to find it very, very difficult to copy, or just a user base if you think about Facebook or some of these emerging social media apps. But the thing is with the 7-Day Startup is these kind of businesses are the worst kind of businesses you can start as a first-time entrepreneur, because the failure rate is just dismal. And it's going to take you years and lots of money to work out if it's going to work. So you need to somehow find a balance. You need to think about, how can I build some sort of asset either over time, or is there something in my business that is naturally building an asset as I go? So large market potential. This is one of my favorite ones, because I think a lot of the mistakes people make is they niche too small. And if you do that, you're going to run out of market and you're never going to be able to build a business that can grow. So when I started WP Curve, I didn't want to do a local agency anymore. I didn't want to be knocking on people's doors, in the hope that I might get 100 clients. I wanted to start something in a huge market. And I started a business where I have 73 million potential customers. There's 73 million websites built on WordPress. This is a huge market. It's 23% of the entire web. So going into a market of 73 million people gives me the confidence that I used to think, like, how is it reasonable that 10,000 people will pay me for this service? And I would just have to look up this number and just think, yeah, of course it is. 10,000 people is absolutely nothing compared to the size of the actual total market. And thinking about, like, can I get 1% of the total market is kind of crazy, and it never really happens that way. But definitely having, broad sense of how big the market is a great idea. So there's a few things you can do there. You can look in the Inc. list, which is a really nice list that you can interrogate for how much revenue these companies are making that have submitted to the list. That's a cool way. A lot of startups have income reports. If you look at something like Crunchbase or Angel List, you'll get a lot of data on companies to give you an idea of their revenues or their funding. If companies are getting, say, $1 million in funding for their idea, you can assume that the investors want to get at least 10x that back. So if something's getting $1 million investment, they're probably at least a $10 million idea, probably have potential for a much, much bigger idea than that. So those are the kind of companies, if there's companies with your exact idea getting that kind of level of funding, then it's probably a big idea. So these are some of the ways you can understand the market size. I don't go into the detail of working out exactly the dollar value of the market. I think it's kind of a wasted exercise, because you're never going to capture a certain percentage of the market. It just doesn't really work like that. I mean, in some cases, companies capture much more of the market. Like with Uber, for example, in San Francisco, I think the stat was that Uber is currently 3 times the size of the taxi market. So the market size itself is not this figure where you have to take 1% of it and therefore you've got a business. But it is a thing that you need to think about, where you need to understand, am I going after a small market and am I going to have to somehow capture a huge part of that? Or am I going after a big market where I can build a multi-million-dollar business quite easily within this market. And by easily, I mean based on the size. It's never easy to build a multi-million-dollar business, but is there a few $1 million worth of room in this market for someone to come in and capture? So number 7 is pain and pleasure differentiators. So the way I think about this is you will hear often that you need to differentiate your business, but the problem with that is that it doesn't matter if your business is different. It only matters if your business is different in a way that customers care about. So when I think about this, I think of these popular brands. I've got my own brand in there because that's the story I'm telling, but I've also got these massive successful startups in there. And the reason I've got those in there is because if you think about why you use something like Uber, if Uber was only different to taxis let's say Uber was exactly the same as taxis, but with Uber you got a slightly nicer car, would that be important enough? Like, that's different, that's differentiation, but would that be important enough for people to really start referring people to Uber and really start talking about it? And like, businesses grow through word of mouth, so the differentiator has to be something that people really care about. And with Uber, there's so many things. I mean, it's I think 30-40% cheaper. There's the ability to order really quickly on the app. There's friendly drivers. There's mints. There's so many things that just make it a much more pleasurable experience and take out all of the pain from taxis. Airbnb is the same thing, and essentially with Airbnb, the pain point there is the price. Like, you go somewhere, you don't necessarily want to stay in a hotel and pay a crazy price for that. Sometimes it might be just a casual holiday, casual stopover. You just want to stay in someone's place and pay a lot less money. So the price is a good example of a pain point that you're solving. Evernote solves the problem of people forgetting stuff, and so you've got an app there that is going to solve that problem for you because you're writing everything in the app, and that's a problem that people care about. And WP Curve, in my case, I wanted to think about the things that really annoyed people with getting their website fixed, and the main one was responsiveness. So is my developer actually going to be available? And if they're not available, what kind of anxiety am I going to experience when that happens? And everyone's experienced that. So I wanted to solve that problem. The consistency of cost is also a big issue with getting your website fixed and working out how much things are going to cost and getting quotes. All of that is taken out of the equation with WP Curve with a simple monthly subscription. So we're delivering something that's different, but we're doing it in a way that the customer cares about. So just remember, it's not enough to be different. It has to be different enough for people to care about enough to talk about. Businesses grow through word of mouth by people telling other people about them. They're not going to grow unless whatever your differentiation is enough for them to start talking about you. So it has to be something that's so pleasurable or solves such a big pain point that people will start talking about it. So number 8 is unique lead generation advantage. And I see so many businesses start that seem to be great ideas that are in a way validated because there are other people running those ideas successfully, but the businesses don't work. And the problem is they don't get enough attention. Business is about getting attention, building trust, and building long-term value for people. But if you don't get attention, you can't build trust, you can't get that momentum, you can't get people referring to you. It's like the really crucial first step. And this is marketing. It's getting your name and your business and your idea out in front of other people. But particularly for a bootstrap founder, how is it that you're going to do this? Because it might be fine if you're a funded startup and you can just throw a whole bunch of money at advertising and compete with everyone else on that front. But if you're a bootstrap founder with limited money, limited resources, you can't afford to do that. You can't compete with the big budgets of big companies. And if you're starting a business in a large market, you will be competing with bigger companies. So what is unique about you that enables you to market your business? In the resources section, you'll find a marketing ideas document. And I talk about this in the book as well. I think I go through 20 different ideas to market a business. You might find some of these things you are really good at, particularly good at. For me, it was content. I really love doing these blog posts. I was able to not only figure out how to create great content, but I was able to scale that and get someone else on board to create and manage the content for me. And this was a skill that I honed that was pretty unique to me. And that was the way I got attention for WP Curve. But what's it going to be for you? What's unique about you that's going to give you a unique advantage with your marketing? How are you going to generate leads? How are you going to get attention for your business? Finally, of course, the ability to launch quickly. I talked about this in Module 0. You might have an epic idea for a business, but if it's going to take you 2 years, it's a bad idea for a first-time entrepreneur or an entrepreneur who hasn't had a big success yet. And I don't need to go on about that too much because this whole course is called the 7-Day Startup. Obviously, I think it's important that you launch quickly and and learn after you launch from real customers with real data. So if you're launching an idea that's going to take you a couple of years and cost you a load of money, then it's a bad idea for a bootstrap founder. So this is the resource I've put together for this, the idea evaluation spreadsheet. You can get this in the resources section and just simply put in your different ideas and evaluate them, give them a score for each of the criteria and figure out what comes out on top. I mean, it's obviously not only an exercise in data, but this will be a really useful way for you to think about, well, is this idea better than this idea? Well, let's think about that. Let's go through and analyze them, give them a score, see which one comes out on top, and maybe that'll give you some direction on which idea might be the best idea for you to launch for your 7-day startup. And the other cool thing you can do with this is if you do have a business already, is go back here and see how well it fits this criteria. You might find it's not a strong idea, or you might find there's things you can do to make it an even stronger idea. So the asset building is an example of that. Is there something you can do to your current business to build more assets, or is there something you can do to make it simpler or to make the revenue more consistent, that kind of thing. So check that out in the resources section. That's the end of Module 1 in the 7-day startup. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys in the next module.